Simon, hey, congratulations for Apple TV's invasion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate your Christmas sweater. That's very festive.
I know, I'm wearing an old sweater. I just like the vintage, 1980s, 1990s sweater.
Listen, that's when I grew up, so I'm all about it. It's awesome.
That is awesome. And your show is awesome, by the way, because I checked it out long ago, but I remember when I first watched the first episode, I could not stop. And I was getting upset with the press screeners because they were only releasing it like one episode at a time, not to reveal any, stuff. But it's so addicting. I will have to tell you that.
Thank you so much. That's the hope. So I really, really appreciate it.
So I guess let's start off with that easy question. What basically sparked you to do Invasion? I understand it. War of the Worlds kind of had a hand in this.
Yeah, you're right. Audrey Chon, who's an executive producer on the show and runs my company, she had found out that the television rights to H.G. Wells' book War of the Worlds were available, and she asked me if I'd be interested, and I loved the book, and loved actually Orson Welles' radio play as much as I loved the book. And so I got excited about that. And as I started thinking about it, the more I thought about it, the further away I got from War of the Worlds. Because if you know the book, it's really kind of a single protagonist. It's British, obviously it's period, which could be updated, but it was still, a British guy. And I really wanted to create something that was global, that was split in its perspectives, that could tell stories, that were lots of different types of stories, so that you would feel like the invasion was happening on a global scale. I mean, so much of the time when you have alien invasion stories, and I love alien invasion as a sort of genre or subgenre of science fiction, but so often you get, it's like the white guy in America or maybe the UK. You don't get a sense of it, and if it's happening around the world, you see it on a little TV screen. And I wanted it to feel like you were seeing this happening truly all over the world. And you were also dropping into people's lives that were real, complex, nuanced, screwed up lives that got even more screwed up by this invasion. That this invasion in some ways was like a magnifying glass on all of the dilemmas and conflicts and crises in these people's lives. And so what started as War of the Worlds became something entirely different, other than aliens invading.
By adding, because usually when people do War of the Worlds, it's one single protagonist. Yeah. It could be completed in a single movie. But because of all these different characters, is that how you came down to the decision saying this has to be a long series? Absolutely.
That's exactly right. I felt like to tell all of these character stories in a really full, nuanced, complex way, I needed more than 2 hours. And I also felt like to do an alien invasion story where you're really on the ground with characters and feeling what it would really feel like, that needed the kind of patience and intimacy and intricacy that multiple hours rather than just 2 could allow.
Now, how many characters did you initially came up with? Because it seems like you could, with the different perspectives, you could have easily came up with dozens of characters. And then the most difficulty part was trying to pare them down.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're totally right. In fact, there were a few characters that we cut. There were 2 more characters that at very early stages. I mean, what happened was I had the idea, I started thinking about it and scribbling thoughts down. And then I wanted to meet with a writer who would be the co-writer, co-creator with me. And David Weil and I had this incredible love fest meeting where we just completely saw eye to eye about how to do this show. And it was like a 4 or 5 hour meeting for the first time. And we started coming up with ideas separately and together for characters. And initially we wanted to touch every continent on the planet. And so we had a character from Africa and we had a character from South America. And at a certain point, we felt like, kind of what I was saying before, if you're going to tell stories really intimately and really focused on those characters and see the sort of reality of how these characters evolve, you're not going to have the space if you're telling 6, 7 stories. You're just going to start, it's going to start to feel crowded, and everybody's going to be fighting for screen time. And also, I think for audiences, it's going to feel very disjointed because they're going to be jumping from storyline to storyline. And so we whittled it down ultimately to our 4 or 5 storylines that felt like the ones that we were most emotionally connected to, even though it hurt to lose those other storylines that hopefully will come back in future seasons. It was the challenge was less finding stories and more losing stories.
This is such an ambitious project by itself. How did you handle production if you were planning to have it on different continents?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I've shot a lot of films, and I've shot films that are all over the place on location, and I've shot films where I've shot X-Men movies where we've used Montreal for 15 different countries, and it works. And, but I do think for this particular show, we wanted to feel as realistic as possible. And I think there's no substitute for being in the real environments, whether that's being on location in a place versus being on stage, or it's being in an actual place. If you're in a market in Morocco, it's different than building a market on a soundstage. So we shot in Japan, Morocco for the Middle East, Japan, Morocco, London, Manchester outside London, where the kids are in the quarry, and New York for all of those locations. And so New York doubled for Ida Bell in the first episode, upstate New York, and London was London, obviously, and Japan gave us those Tokyo exteriors that were, you can't construct that. And so it was really important for us for the audience to feel like they were there. Now, the production complexity of that is massive. One, when you're doing a television show as opposed to a movie, you have to cross board, meaning like you're shooting scenes from episodes 6 and 7 at the same time as 1, because you kind of want to shoot everything in Tokyo when you're in Tokyo. You don't want to be going back and forth the whole time, And so that's really complicated when you have to basically shoot out everything in Morocco, shoot out everything in Tokyo, shoot out everything in the UK. You don't have the luxury of being able to go in continuity and order. And then we had the very obvious challenge. Challenge is a light way of putting it, of shooting during COVID. We had to shut down for about 3 months in the middle of last year at the height of COVID. And we watched city after city, location after location go down. The way the world went is different places were hit harder at different points. And so it was just impossible to predict when places were going to go down, when they were going to open up again, when they were going to shut down yet again. So we were juggling a lot in order to get that feeling of reality and real presence.
Absolutely. Well, one more thing, Simon.
Sure.
The series seems to conclude itself, but it sounds like you have more to this, more story. Why did you want to basically self-conclude sort of like the first season, but and how much story do you really have? Do you plan for like 3, 4, 6 seasons in a movie? What's going on?
I have an idea of how many seasons ideally I would want. I don't really want to say it because I feel like I just learned the lesson from a lot of my friends who work in TV, where like they say it's going to be 4 seasons, and when it's 8 seasons, invariably people are like, they just stretched it out. It should have just been 4 seasons. And the opposite, if somebody says it's 5 seasons and ends up being 4 seasons, they're like, oh, they got shut down. And it's like, no, maybe they just felt like they changed their mind, which happens when you're a creative person. So I have a sense of how many it should be. It certainly in my mind should be more than 1. And I really approached this first season in many ways if you think about like the traditional alien invasion kinds of movies more than shows, I approach this first season in some ways like the first act of a movie, where you meet all the main characters, you get a sense of the threat, the sort of mega threat arrives at the end of the season, and now you're on to, you know, the sort of major action of the second act, which is, you know, and primarily the way that stories are told in features. So yeah, I mean, I certainly imagine more than one season. And for me, I left this season as a false ending, kind of, okay, now the bigger challenge is here, and we're sort of catapult into what would traditionally be the second act. Shit hits the fan.
You know what? Then I can't wait to binge watch the next seasons or the seasons after that. Simon, hey, thank you very much for talking to us about Invasion, and happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you too. I really appreciate it. You take care.
Thank you. Bye now.